If you ask me, the Aeon Noire is one of the best closed-back headphones of all time, and the people that have that headphone finally have an upgrade path. Let's talk about it. I'm DMS, you're watching the Headphone Show, and well, I'm reviewing a DCA headphone today. I'm sure many of you might remember I didn't really like the Expanse that much, but I always loved the Noire. I think it's fair to say from the intro, though, that the E3, well, it does a lot of things I like. Dan Clark Audio's new closed back at a price of $2,000 US in the ballpark of. Now that is not a cheap headphone at all, but neither was the Expanse, the Stealth, the Noire. I mean, a lot of what they make is high end, but amidst a choice of headphones ranging from $700-800 all the way up to $4,000, this one, the E3, is my favorite. Let's talk about why, starting with build and comfort. Now, the build of this is very similar to the Stealth, and with that, the Expanse as well. An extremely comfortable headphone with a self-adjusting strap on top. The leather is a little bit stiff, but leather wears in with time. Very large, very soft pads. This almost skeletal structure that holds the ear cup on to the headband, and the result is a nearly weightless feeling all the way around. Where this departs though from the Noire and shares some family blood with the Stealth and Expanse is the metamaterial used inside the ear cup. This uses DCA's AMTS system. Though you can tell it's been changed a bit. Just by running my hand over the surface of it, I can feel divots and bumps in different areas than there were on Expanse or on Stealth. DCA uses these to tune the headphone to a very exact frequency response, though these do also as a result have very low distortion, and we'll talk about that stuff later. Covering the rest of the build, we have these bass vents on the side with a glossy cup, hexagonal pattern, and E3 stamped there on the side. The high-rose connectors we're used to on DCA headphones, and it comes with a cable that is beefy but still pretty malleable. I'm using this one with 4.4mm, but I also have a 6.3mm connection. The carrying case is basically the same as with the Expanse and the Stealth, minus the branding on it, which now says E3. All things considered, it is a very comfortable headphone. I can't help but wonder though if some adjustments were made that make it feel a little bit different from Stealth or Expanse. I know the headphones have different weights, and that weight is probably distributed a little bit differently. Either way, let's move into sound. Subjective first, then we'll cover frequency response after that. First thing to note, this takes some power. It's not insanely hard to drive, but it's not easy either. With the Quest Style M15, my favorite little dongle, I have to use the balance connection and usually on high gain, and even then it's not going to get to blasting levels, but more than comfortable for what I listen at. Something like the new JDS Atom though is plenty of power. Tonal balance, it's honestly really good, and timbre is as well as a result. It's a closed back planar that has a bass shelf, but it's in the very deep sub bass. It's not bloated and it's not boomy, but it also manages to be more punchy than anything DCA has put out before. I would go so far as to say this is the most dynamic sounding headphone that they've managed to put out. There's a lot of contrast against what I would describe as a very black background. It's as if this headphone is the sensory deprivation chamber that is filled with music. An infinite void of black space that the music fills into with crystal clear separation. I've always liked closed backs for their isolation, and this does that pretty well. On top of that, with its ability to have a very, very clean sound, well, I'm sure you get the picture. And elaborating more on clean sound, it does sound like there is no noise in the background of this. There's none of that grain or haze that you get with some headphones. It's just crisp but smooth. It's articulate, it's tight, it's detailed, but it's also not giving you any extra. It feels like it's very truthful to exactly what is happening in the music, no more and no less. If you're listening to strings, you hear the string pluck, you hear the space that it's in, but nothing more. It's not exaggerated, but it's also not lacking. I know I used the word articulated before, but I think that articulated is the best word to describe the way this headphone sounds. It's just very tight, very articulated, very, very nuanced, but doing so without sacrificing its timbre and without being bright. It's definitely still mildly V-shaped. Not V-shaped as much as the Empyrean 2, which I still liked a lot, but it's also not dark like the Stealth ended up being in the upper treble. As a result of that, I feel like the balance of the upper treble in this is better than the stealth, at least for me personally. I feel like the stealth got a bit hot around 3 kHz and then got a bit darker after that, whereas this, well, it still goes up around 3K, but then it sort of maintains through the rest of the treble, which is also why I liked the treble balance and timbre more on the Noire. Something I'm sure you'll notice is that a lot of traits that I liked in the Noire transferred over into the E3, but are honestly improved in many ways. And it feels like a natural evolution from the Noire. Though again still improved, the treble is smoother on E3. The background is more black, the low mids are not congested, they're very open. It's not bloated and it's not boomy, but the bass is still impactful and deep. In fact, I would describe the mid-range and bass on this as damn near perfect. Vocals can be intimate and spacious at the same time, which is nice. It is a closed back, it's very good at sound localization, but it's also not as closed in as some things might be. Like recently I've been working on a video about the CD900ST, an old Sony from the 1980s, which I love them, but they are a bit claustrophobic. This has that sort of closed back intimacy, but it's not claustrophobic, it still gives the music some space to breathe. Again, I call back to that infinite black void that the sound is placed within. With that, imaging is also very good. It's very easy for me to close my eyes, see where instruments are in the mix, as good as it can be on a pair of headphones. Something like the HG800S I feel like still has an advantage here, but that is kind of the pinnacle of soundstage in an open back headphone, whereas this is a closed back. But I also enjoy the presentation on this more than the 800S, because I'm still getting that rich low end. I'm getting more of an isolated sound experience, and it makes it very easy to spend a significant period of time sitting and listening to music. I was going to film this 2 days ago, but every time I sat down to film, I'd put the headphones on again, and a couple of hours would go by. Now, this isn't to say that E3 is perfect. I think that some people will find the 2 kHz to 5 kHz range to be a little bit hot. That's not the case for everyone. I think that will be the case for Resolve, probably. For me, the 3 to 5 kHz range reminds me of things like the HT600, which I enjoy quite a bit, or the MM500, which I also liked the sound of quite a lot. Though the treble on this is a bit more elevated above that range than it is on things like the MM500. That said, though, I honestly think this is a better headphone overall than MM500 is. And that says a lot because MM500 is a very, very good open back planar. I do think that the perfect closed back for me would be a mix, at least in the treble, between the DCA Stealth and the DCA E3. And both of them with a little bit less energy at 3 kHz, just a hair. But I would definitely want the mid-range and the bass from E3. It's just more full, more impactful. It just sounds cleaner and better. All of that said though, E3 is the best sounding closed back headphones I have ever put on my head. In fact, it's better than most of the open back headphones I put on my head too. So with that said, let's open up my laptop here and talk about frequency response. Now, I'm not sure if you've seen graphs like this before. If you haven't, I will put a link in the video description on how these work. I'll also show you guys both the raw and the compensated measurements. This is on the Brüel & Kjær 4128C head and torso simulator. More or less though, the gray area is the average listener preference. Essentially what you get from the Harman research and the Harman target. And in our compensated graph, we're able to compensate for the RIG's diffuse field HRTF. More or less, if something fits within this gray area, it fits within the average listener preference. And as you can see, this headphone does that pretty well. We've got deep extended strong low end that's not boomy at all, a little bit of warmth in the low mids, and then linearity all the way up until around 1.5K. We drop down just a hair from there up until about 2 kHz when it starts going back up. 2.5K is elevated up until about 3.5K, and then we get some ups and downs from 4K onward. All things considered, this is not bad. Look at the scale of this and you'll notice that a lot of these dips and peaks are going up and down by maybe 2 to 3 decibels, which realistically is not very much. This is a very linear headphone, all things considered. And the timbre of the headphone reflects that, as does its overall tonal balance. You can see where around that 3-4 kHz range, it is just a little bit hotter than the rest of the frequency range. We see the same thing on the Expanse and on the Stealth. But again, the rest of the treble kind of keeps in line with that on this headphone, so that area doesn't sound very isolated. If you had to do any EQ to this headphone at all, I would probably take a treble shelf and pull everything down by maybe 2 decibels over, say, 2.3K, or maybe everything over 2K. That said, it doesn't sound bright, it doesn't sound sharp, in fact it sounds really smooth. So what's the conclusion here? Well, E3 is my favorite thing DCA's put out so far. It's one of my favorite headphones that I've got my hands on so far, and I've had my hands on a lot of headphones. It's one of the rare cases where price and sound quality both correlate, and you get something that is not only good at its price, but extremely competitive, which says a lot for a headphone that's in the multi-$1,000 range. E3 is a very easy recommendation for someone who liked the Noire or wants an extremely good closed back, and with it having more dynamics and more punch than the previous models, I'm really excited to see where DCA is going next. Well, that felt a little bit like gushing, but let's be honest, with how many headphones have been on my head, it's not very often when I find something that really excites me in this hobby. And when I do, it's refreshing. Looking back, I'm sure a lot of you know that I wasn't thrilled with the Expanse or with the Stealth. But E3 has shown me that DCA means business. And that business sounds pretty dang good. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna get off here. I'm gonna go listen to some music. I just got a couple new CDs in that I'd like to test out. I think I have just the pair of headphones for it. So that's gonna wrap up this video, guys. If you liked it, leave a like down below. Comment, let me know what you want to see in the future. If you want to get active in the community, you can hit the forums or Discord, both available at the link in the video description. As always, don't forget to stick around, subscribe for more videos like this in the future. Until next one, guys. Peace.